There was a time when you could have a great conversation as long as you didn't talk about politics or religion. Great conversations. Now, the trouble nowadays is that everything is political, and everything raises to a level of religion status for some people. So that sometimes you just can't have any conversations anymore. It's all, we've got to avoid that. And that would be okay, except that our Jesus said, I want you to go and make disciples of all nations. And I want you to say that there's not one area that we can't talk about how I want to change and transform that area of life. And that's where we go. And for this next series, we called it Engage, because there's so many things that we want to engage ourselves, and how God can engage us in this conversation, but also how are we engaging other people? I just start off with, I just want to say a big old trigger warning before every one of these. Because I know that it's gonna be, I don't know, I've ever thought of it this way, or I'm not sure I like what this is saying. And then the hope is that we're just going to jump into some of these and talk about how Jesus transforms every area of our lives. And we have friends who are never going to go to church, but we interact with them, and we should engage them in how our Jesus transforms every area of life. So I hope that you avoid the extremists in all of this whole next month. And I hope that you choose to see what Jesus says about it, about each of these things, so that we don't just go to the sidelines and create division, that we choose to be united still as Christians. So today we jump into the deep water just right away, because if you're going to, you might as well dive right in. And we're going to talk about things like prejudice and injustice and race relations. So, and I started off with Colossians chapter 3 because that's where I want to end. That's where I want to land today, so that this is our big idea. You know, the Apostle Paul said this to a church in Colossae. In this new life, it doesn't matter if you're a Jew or a Gentile, which was either or. You're either a Jew or you were a Gentile. It doesn't matter if you're circumcised or uncircumcised, whether you're barbaric or uncivilized or slave or a free, doesn't matter. Christ is all that matters. And He lives in all of us. See, for Paul, he was jumping into this idea that there was racism, there's always been racism, and it can never have a hold in the church. It can never have a hold in the church. I was listening to a pastor, I think Pastor Tony Evans was talking about this, and I can paraphrase him this way. He says, we need to get this right in the church. How can we talk with a society, to a culture that is racially divided, unless we have it right in the church? We have a society that's looking for answers to all of this. And Christians should be the first one to say, I got it. I got it. In the church we have this right. See, I have been blessed over the years, since college, to have great people of color in my life, that I could just ask questions when I was just ignorant, that I had no clue. My friend Zan, and I maybe have said this before, my friend Zan, I must have been a sophomore in college. Zan is a 5'3" black Pentecostal preacher man. He wasn't a preacher back then, but he, I think God just sent him my way and said, let's see if we can mess with Matt's life here and change him all around, and I'm going to use Zan to do it. And I would ask Zan just the weirdest questions because I just didn't know. And he was gracious enough to answer some of these questions. The one I remember most was, I said, Zan, if a black person goes to the beach, do they get sunburned? And some of you guys are saying, what? How could you ask that? And then Zan looked at me and he says, Matt. And I really said, I don't know. I understand for myself. I know my skin. How about for you? And I was genuine. And he just said, Matt, yes, we all burn. It's okay, that's all I needed to know. And it was just helpful for me. You know, just a couple of weeks ago, I had Pastor Talbert. And I have to remember that he is my friend. He just doesn't speak for all black people, but he's my friend, and I ask him questions, and we have that relationship that we can be honest with each other. And I asked him, all right, so this whole Rittenhouse thing, you know, it was a white guy who killed some white guys, but the black community is so up in arms about this. I don't get that. And he had to walk through that with me. He said, you know, there's this thought that if there was a black man running through the streets with an assault-style weapon, that then he was shooting people, that it would be a different outcome when he came to the police. He probably wouldn't get out alive. And if he did get to court, he definitely wouldn't be found not guilty. And it was just, that's the impression. Whether it's accurate or not, whether it would have happened, it's a moot point because that was a situation. But that was the feeling, and it was helpful for me to be able to talk about these things. And then we can discuss it. But it was this honesty that things are just not the way they're supposed to be. Every culture has had some sort of racial tension, and most of the time some racism. And sometimes it was just ignorance, that you just didn't know. And sometimes it was intentional hatred. And sometimes it was just modeled from people of our past, maybe family members. And they said, this is how you're supposed to do it. And you didn't know enough to say, wait a minute, that's wrong. That's racist. But every culture has had some sort of tension like that. Even today, you know, in America, we say, "Oh, it's terrible in America," but other countries have the same. You know, you got Muslims and just normal, everyday religion in Netherlands. There's that tension there. There's a cultural problem and tension in the Netherlands. You go to Nigeria and there's the Christians and the Muslims banging heads. You know, there's tensions everywhere. And we should talk about this. See, good-meaning people in America said, we're going to try to get this right. We got the Constitution and we said, all men are created equal. But you know, we're not going to have 13 states if we don't get some of the southern states in there, so that there was a whole sector of people that were excluded from all men are created equal. You know, but good people try to get it right. You know, we had this war. The North and the South, and a whole bunch of white people and some black people fought in that too, and they said, this is not the way it's supposed to be. We need to get this right. There was this huge war. How many thousands of people died to make it right again? No, and even after that, there was people came over from China and they were marginalized. People came over from Ireland. There was a potato famine there. They said, "Oh, let's come here," and they were kind of marginalized. Even into the 60s, it was still the civil rights era. There was still racism there. There was Jim Crow laws, but good-meaning people try to get this right. And we need to get this right, especially in the church and hopefully in our society. See, this is not just an American thing. This is a people thing. A people thing. You know, I start this way just to focus on our deficiencies. You know, we all want to say, well, I'm not racist. I don't have any, I don't marginalize people. But we all do it to an extent. And we all should need to get it right. And I want to do a case study here. I'm going to show you how the church had to get it right. Because they were doing it 180 degrees different than how Jesus said to do it. Well, let me read a little bit from Ephesians chapter 2. Because in the early church, well, even before the early church, if you wanted to follow the Almighty God, You needed to be Jewish. Religion was for the Jews, and this is how it was. Ephesians chapter 2, starting at 11. Don't forget that you Gentiles used to be outsiders. You were called uncircumcised heathens by the Jews, who were proud of their circumcision, even though it affected only their bodies, not their hearts. In those days, you were living apart from Christ. You were excluded from citizenship among the people of Israel, and you did not know the covenant promises of God He made for them. You lived in this world without God and without hope. And that's the way it was. Religion was for the Jews. Anybody who was a Gentile couldn't even get into the temple. They had to stay in the outer courts. They couldn't even worship in the temple. And then that kind of worked its way into the church as well. Oh, you're not circumcised. Well, you need to be excluded there. Or you're a Gentile. Or you're from Africa, or you're from India, or you're from wherever you are. You're not Jewish. You need to become Jewish to be a Christian. Acts chapter 6 shows how it worked to a point here. Because in the early church, the church was the social programs. And the church distributed food to the widows, people that didn't have a lot of means. So they would get food and they would give them to the widows. But they would start with the Jewish widows and then work their way to the non-Jewish widows, maybe the Greeks or from another country. And pretty soon the Greek widows and their families said, wait a minute, this is not right. How come we're always excluded? How come we're always marginalized here? And all 12 apostles came together. And they said, we got to fix this. This cannot be the way it goes. And this is what they did. They said, all right, we're going to choose 7 people. 7 people, we call them deacons nowadays because the ministry of mercy. But 7 people that they were going to do this work. Full of the Spirit. These were people that wanted to do right in this world because of Jesus, and that was going to be their ministry. And it turns out this is the fun part. When you read your Bible, all 7 of them were Greek. Not a one of them was Jewish. They said, we're going to go out of our way to show that the church is different. The church is going to say, this is the way it's supposed to be. There's not going to be Jewish, the 2-tier system, the Jewish and then everybody else. We're going to make it so that everybody is the same here. And this is how Paul goes on, that Jesus was creating something new. Verse 13 of chapter 2. He says, but now, it's easy to run by that, but he goes, this is the way it used to be, but now, this is how it's going to be. You have been united with Christ Jesus. You've been united with Him. Once you were far away from God, but now you've been brought near to Him through the blood of Christ. Let me skip to verse 15 here. Jesus made peace between Jews and Gentiles. And He created in Himself one new people from the 2 groups. Together as one body, Christ reconciled both groups to God by means of His death on the cross. And our hostility towards each other was put to death. And you heard it, right? You heard that. Someone said this a while, and I forget who said it, but it's so great. It's a hanger for this. See, it's not a skin problem, it's a sin problem. In the church, it's not about your skin, it's about the sin inside of us that Jesus removes. It doesn't matter the color of the skin. You matter to Jesus. If we could get anything for today, that's where we land. You matter to Jesus. There's no 2-tier system here in the church. There's the same status before God. Jesus was creating something new. And let me explain it a little bit, and I'll give you an example here. I have become a great fan of mayonnaise lately. I don't know if anybody else is. I find it is in most of the best foods that I eat. Like, and I got to see them all over this New Year's time, because you have the parties, and you got the spinach artichoke dip. That is some kind of gold right there. You know, that is good stuff. You have like a tuna fish. You know, mayo is in there. Oh, that is a good stuff. You know, all of the great foods have mayonnaise in it. And we would never have mayonnaise without a process called emulsification. Ben was asking me earlier, what is emulsification? Glad you asked, Ben. Thank you for that. It's all the bakers I know what emulsification is. I didn't know what it was. So I'm telling you I learned this past week. Emulsification is this. It's a process where you take two liquids that would normally never fit together, and you make it to fit together. That's what it is. So when you're making mayonnaise, does anybody make their own mayonnaise? You know, go get Hellman's. It's great. It's awesome. Am I good so far? All right. Whew. All right. This is what it is. Mayonnaise is oil and water. Everybody knows oil, water do not mix. They just don't. Oil just rises to the top, water stays on the bottom. They don't mix. But mayonnaise has oil in it, like vegetable or olive oil. And then it has liquid like, you know, lemon juice, or I don't know what else, the juice is in there. And what happens is they say, oh, we're not going to mix. Nope, we're not going to mix together. And then you throw in this egg, specifically the egg yolk. And the egg yolk says, hey, come on over here. Yeah, oil, come on over here. And then water, come on over here. We're going to mix together now. And the egg mixes it together, and it becomes mayonnaise. Jesus emulsified the church. He brought Gentiles and Jews together. Come on over here. And then he brought them together and mixed them together. Two groups that would never mix together. Never purposefully, intentionally mixed together. And he brought them together and said, oh, you're the church. You are my people. Do we get that? Because some of us resist coming together. Oh, no, Jesus, I'm good over here. I'm just going to stay over here. I don't need to mix with those people in the church. I'm good as I am. And we resist Jesus trying to bring us together as his people. That's our church sometimes. It's definitely our culture. It's definitely that. Man, I don't want to get together with all these people. I don't even like those people. Look around you here. How many people in this place would get together on any given day? But you have been brought together as God's people. There are so many different personalities in here that you would say, I don't want to be in the same room as them. And we all know who they are. And maybe it's me. I'll just throw that out there. We have so many different types of people gathered in this room. Ages, personalities. We have different languages spoken in this church that I don't know how to speak. And Jesus said, I am making something new. This is my church. This is new. God changes us, transforms us as people, and then he transforms what we are a part of, his church. It says, this is what I'm going for. And some of you are saying, wow, that's a great illustration, Matt. How do we do that? How do we get to the point of saying, well, I can see this acted out? Well, I want to give you a couple ideas on how we can make our culture something new. Well, as Jesus has called us to be new, how can we make our culture new? And I grabbed from a number of different sources, people like Tim Keller, who I respect so greatly, on reasons and ways to make this happen. People from the past like Frederick Douglass, Martin Luther King Jr., other people that have spoken into my life, and my wonderful black pastors that I get to rub shoulders with all the time. And they have helped me, get this list together of how can we make this happen? Because that's where the struggle comes. Because we agree in theory, how do we make this happen? How do we go forward with this something new that Jesus makes? I only have 4 ideas here. But let me give you the first one. It's of lament. Lament. Hopefully this is not a stretch for anybody. That this world is not as it is supposed to be. We can get there, right? This is an easy one. Whenever you're going to talk about race relations or prejudice in our society, we have to get to the point of saying, this is not how it is supposed to be. And even more, we have to get to the point of, this is my own that I need to confess. I don't know how many times I have had to say, God, I recognize that in others because that was me. It wasn't until God brought me to be with people that are different. I had terrible black examples in my life. I had terrible family examples in my life. And that was my world. And when Jesus changed me, He used great friends like Zan to change how I see my world. And I have to lament what I have done already. And sometimes those things that spurred up once in a while, it's like, oh, what am I thinking? We need to lament that our world is not as we want it to be. And it's certainly not as God has called it to be. And we need to start there before we get to the point of listening to other people. Because we do need to listen to other people. I don't know if you drive down by the corner by Walgreens, every once in a while you see this guy, heavier guy, this big old guy with a booming voice, and he's always yelling out with this big poster, Black Lives Matter, and he's walking around, and he's really intense. And then people are supposed to honk or something like that. I don't know what they're supposed to do. And some people do honk, and some people just drive right by. And the thought that comes to my mind every time I see him is I just want to sit with him and say, what do you mean by that? What's your hope? What's your purpose for standing out here? Because you're loud. Oh my goodness, you're loud. I can hear you with my windows rolled up. And you are loud. I just want to understand you. What are you hoping for? What if we did that with everybody? What do you mean by that? Just so that I can understand what you're driving at. I might not understand. I might not agree with it, but I want to understand you. What are you driving at? When you have this sign up in your yard that says Black Lives Matter, what do you mean by that? Have you ever had a conversation about what that means? Or are you just saying, well, that's what other people have told me to think? To understand a person, just to say, I want to listen to you and hear what you're saying. Because listening to other people is not about blaming them or making them feel guilty. You know, my friend was riding his bike home from work in Minneapolis a number of years ago, and he was hauled off the bike, ripped off the bike by a group of black men and beaten up. He spent the night in the hospital. Do I blame all black people for this? No. Do we blame all white people for slavery? Or for the 60s or the Jim Crow? No. We blame people for what they've done. And then we call them out on it. But it's not about assigning blame when we listen to somebody. You know, if you've ever talked to, I grew up in the Chicago area where it was Roseland, Illinois. It used to be there was a church on every corner, and it was all Dutch people. Why, it was called Roseland. Dutch people know that one. But back in the late 50s, early 60s, there was this thing called white flight. And all the white people left, and they were saying, all right, I have put all of my money into my house because that's my retirement. I paid it all off. And if my house was worth $100,000, it was down to worth $60,000. And maybe it's worth down to $35,000. I got to get out of here just for a financial reason. I want to live the rest of my life. And they left. And some people were saying, all this, I don't want to live by black people. And some people left for that reason. Some people left because, man, crime is coming and it's creeping in. And I don't want to live by that. And the white people left. And they were angry. Oh, we got pushed out of our homes. And then the black people who moved in said, where are you going? We came here for the same reasons why you lived here. We wanted good schools. We wanted a safe neighborhood. We wanted a good place to grow families just like you, and you abandoned us. We're angry. So both sides are angry. And until you listen to both sides, you go one way or the other usually. But both have legitimate points. And you only get there from listening and hearing what they're thinking and what they're feeling. Do we listen to people anymore? We can't get to the forgiving until we understand and we listen to people. Well, let me give you one more, or two more. This is maybe the hardest one. Well, if the other two weren't hard already. Here's one that is difficult. We need to call out inequalities. We need to call them out. This has been the biggest one for me. Talking with my black pastor friends just to figure out, all right, how do we get a hand around this? And if it was such a simple fix, man, it would have been done a long time ago. But there are some complexities here, and there's some systemic things that you go, oh, how do we ever fix this? There's some of it is structural in the framework. Some of it is cultural even. And some of it is just the government. And then we got to figure out, how do we grab a hold of this? It's always the solutions. How do we get this fixed? That is the sticking point. And I am not long on solutions today because I want you to think about some of them. I think we need to think about there is a reality of poverty, and there's a connection to prison rates and poor schools. There's connections there. And oftentimes it takes a hold in the black community. And oftentimes other minorities. And it's just taken a hold. We just need to acknowledge those exist. And figure ways to, how do we get a hold of that? That's an inequality that we need to address. And there's lots of blame to go around on this one. Lots of causes we need to figure out. How do we get through this? We have a court system in this country. I think it's one of the better ones in our world, but it's flawed in some ways. It favors those that can hire good attorneys. It's not necessarily whether it's if you're a black person or a white person. Oftentimes it's, can you hire a good attorney? And if you're a young black man, oftentimes you can't hire a great attorney. And there's some injustices even within the court system. And you see them. And as much as possible, we have people that seek them out and say, that has to go. But our court system's not perfect. Our prison system is not perfect. Who wants to hire someone who's got a prison record? And when the level of black men in prison is so high, when you get out, what are you going to do? Because nobody wants to hire a felon. These are things that have to, what's the solution for that? Man, there's lots of different solutions on that. We just need to call out there's some inequalities here. And we need to talk about responsibilities as well. There was a study made in 1965. You have an 85% chance to stay out of poverty if you finish high school, get married before you have kids, and you get a job. What's happened within the black culture that children are having children? That there's people that they don't either get that job or they don't feel qualified, or they try to get the job and there's not a level playing field, or however, whatever the system is, some of it's personal responsibility even within this whole mix. Is it eyes glazing over yet? These are tough situations that our Jesus says we need to talk about this. And we need to lead with love whenever we do this. We need to listen. We need to hold each other accountable, but this is complex stuff. And as Christians, we need to try to bring people together as we bring people together in the church. Let me give you the last one that I have for this morning. I want to say that every life matters to Jesus. And I was talking with some people just this past week that I'm not a big fan of any big placard, well, Black Lives Matter, or Blue Lives Matter, or Asian Lives Matter. I'm not a big fan of that. Because nobody knows what that means until you talk with them. But I can say this. Blank. Insert whatever word you want to have in there. Your life matters because you matter to Jesus. And just because of that, I need to show you respect. I need to treat you like a child of God. I need to shower you with love. I'm not a white Christian any more than I'm a white American. We are loved by Jesus. And that He has obliterated all the tears in our world here and said, you are my people. We celebrate communion today. We on the schedule, it was going to be last Sunday. But I said, can we do it this Sunday? Because what we celebrate in communion is that something new in our world. That we are all the same before Jesus. That it's not a skin problem. It's a sin problem. And our Jesus said, you are all in the same boat. You're all separated from God. You have this sin problem. You all do. We all do. And try as we might, we cannot bridge that. And Jesus came, we celebrated it at Christmas time. And when He grew up, He was tortured and brutalized and suffered on a cross to pay the sins for us. And for us. Not just Jewish people, not just Gentiles, but all of us. We're all the same. And when He cried out with a loud voice, "It is finished!" He says there's no more two tiers anymore. All of us are the same. And we all need Jesus to be right before our God. So everyone who places their trust that Jesus has taken away their sins celebrates this morning. That's the beauty. That your life matters to Jesus.